Curtis Valentine here, founder of Real Men Teach, and you are listening to Ed Up, Accelerated Excellence.
The Ed Up Accelerated Excellence podcast is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of Ed Up Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EDUPXE15 off. Learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
Welcome to Ed Up Accelerated Excellence, the podcast for the advancement of educational excellence and equity. And our next guest, really, this is exciting for us because we are returning to Empire State University after 1 year, speaking with the illustrious leader, Dr. Lisa Wallendorf. And we are back with her Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer, Xiomara Giordano. So will you please introduce yourself to the Ed Up Accelerated Excellence community?
Absolutely. So as you stated, my name is Xiomara Giordano, and I use she, they, ella pronouns. I am the Assistant Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer at Empire State University, which is the access wing of SUNY Empire, the SUNY system. So we are very, very excited to spend this time with you today and have a conversation.
Well, we're excited to have you, so we're going to get right into it. So can you share for us your journey of becoming the Assistant Vice President for DEI and Chief Diversity Officer? What has that been for you?
Absolutely. So my journey to this role has been deeply personal and professional. I think like many of us, it began with experiences of navigating higher education as a first generation college student, right? It opened my eyes to the transformative power of education, but also all of the complications that come. So I was able to, throughout my career, really be mentored by wonderful, remarkable folks who encouraged me to translate my passion for educational access into institutional leadership, right? So my path has included roles in student affairs, academic support, and eventually with a specialization, my scholarship is in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I was able to take all of these experiences and move them into a space where I could do intentional inclusion work, right? So each of my positions built on the last, and it provided me with comprehensive understanding of the academy and the way that equity and inclusion touches every aspect of the ecosystem. So when I had the opportunity to join Empire, I was drawn to its commitment to serving diverse student populations and a genuine desire to create an environment where everyone can thrive.
I absolutely love that. I like this idea of creating an environment where everyone can thrive. So we are not a political podcast. However, we are a podcast that discusses important issues around excellence and equity. And equity and excellence both occur in context. So can you set the stage for conversational educational excellence and equity at Empire, describing the core functions of your office for those who might not be familiar with the role of the Office of DEI. And I think that's important in the current political context that we're in.
Absolutely. So I think that, our office, it serves as both a catalyst and a collaborator across the institution.
Right.
So it's hard. Our office's function is to make sure that the institution is living up to its highest ideals of equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? And they're woven into the fabric of everything that we do. So we work to identify and remove barriers to participation, and whether those exist in policies, practices, or campus culture, right? So for example, my office offers insight and expertise and resources to academic departments to make sure that we're engaging in inclusive pedagogy pedagogy. We collaborate with student affairs to foster a sense of belonging for all students. We also work with HR to work on recruitment and retention of diverse faculty and staff, and also ensure that our practices are equitable. And then we collect and analyze data to ensure that our progress and we're keeping to what we're saying, we're doing what's on the tin, right? So the thing that I feel that we do that's most important is that we create spaces for difficult and necessary conversations about identity, power, and opportunity that strengthen our community, right? So when we see an imbalance, we find a way to talk about it and to work through it, and then to adjust for it, right? So our work isn't separate from educational excellence. It's essential to achieving it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. We do live in a world in which folks come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. So I appreciate this idea of creating a culture and a space and a hub for folks to have difficult conversations. But I want to underscore how you explain that as to strengthen the community as a whole. So I think that's very powerful. Your institution is New York's only online public institution, or IHE, or Institution of Higher Education. What unique opportunities or challenges are presented when engaging in DEI work, particularly in the online environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I'll start with opportunities because I'm a positive person. I like to lead with opportunities, right? Yes. So the opportunities is that we get to reach a truly diverse population across the entire state and beyond. Right, we have a lot of students who are military affiliated and military serving, and we get to follow them through their journey. They don't have to stop out; they can continue. So it's easier to engage students from various backgrounds, and also from underserved communities. So rural communities, places where people don't go to find a school. We're there.
Right.
Online accommodates diverse learning styles and personal circumstances. So it makes a fully accessible option, right? So if you have a physical limitation or, anxiety, we can meet you there. We get to where you are, which is another really wonderful opportunity. And then finally, we can leverage technology to create innovative DEI initiatives. So virtual workshops, online platforms, guest speaker series that can be recorded, that people can attend when they can, right? And again, we're bringing the university to them in their time and meeting them where they're at. So the challenges, because you did ask about them.
Yes, the challenges.
So one of the challenges is fostering a sense of belonging and community can be difficult. People do feel isolated, and it is harder to get people to lean in, right, in this space. The other thing is that some students may have, unreliable access to technology. And so, we want to make sure that they can do it. We're trying to be as supportive as we can, but sometimes things don't cross over, right? If there's electrical issues, if there's connectivity issues. And then, understanding and addressing the unique cultural nuances and the backgrounds and challenges of students in an online environment, it really does require careful consideration and targeted strategies. We have to make sure that we are thinking holistically, and we're not trying to cookie cut. There's no cookie cutting, right? And the other thing is students bring their culture, their microculture to the space. So as, in a brick and mortar, let's say the mascot is Badgers and we go to the gym, everybody in that room is a Badger, right? You're meeting them there. But in an online environment, when you go to their home, you're in their home. If they have a good experience, it's in their home. But if they had a negative experience, it's in their home. It feels much more personal. So being sure that we're riding that line where we're being inclusive and respectful, but understanding that we're not all physically in the same place. So we're not all intellectually, spiritually, culturally in the same place at the same time.
Right. I appreciate that because I think that one is the culture side, but location is also important. I think many folks in our conversations brought around educational uplift is we often don't talk about rural environments. So you mentioned that in this reach, in this scope of the online programming that Empire offers that allows communities that likely won't have access to education due to travel or economic issues. So you can bring that to them. But you're right. I'm just thinking about we're doing some work in Puerto Rico after the hurricane and the struggles of folks not having access to power, and universities thinking in innovative ways to maintain contact with not only students but also with families, because the internet, access to internet, was important for family life in general nowadays. So I really like that. How are your students feeling now that, we're hearing at the top level within the U.S. a lot of language around anti-DEI, and because this is the role that you sit in. So how are your students feeling on campus, and how are you addressing those issues in this online environment?
Absolutely. So it is a mixed bag. Right? Because we serve a lot of different people in a lot of different places, we get a lot of different responses. Some students are really concerned, and so they write and they ask questions. They're curious. Mm-hmm. They are anxious for their own personal identities, or they're anxious for people that they know and love. And so they have been very communicative, which is important. Right? The way that we retain balance in this environment is by ensuring that we're exchanging good information as often and clearly as possible. I've gotten a lot of really beautiful, supportive messages from community members and students, faculty and staff who are like, we need you here, what you do is important, and et cetera. Some students less so, mm-hmm. And they feel like, it's about time. And I lean into those conversations with curiosity. What about my office is not serving you? What about this space is not doing for you what you need to happen? And so when I get I call them nastygrams. When I get a nastygram from a student, the first thing I think to myself is, I've got to look in my office and my praxis. What am I missing? Mm-hmm. And how did I miss this person? Because if we're going to get through this as a culture, as a community, as a country, what we need to be doing is going back and getting those people we left behind. We have left behind folks that need us to represent them, to stand up for them, to speak up for them, and they don't know how to ask for it. And so I try to redouble my efforts and let them know, look, I don't need to jam anything down your throat, but I work for every person in the state of New York. I work for every student. I am an officer of the state of New York. I take that very, very seriously. And so I want to make sure that I'm going back and figuring out, what can I do to create a space, no matter how big or small, that you can occupy when you're ready to occupy it. And then I let it go. And if they want to come around, great. And if they don't, that space remains. Because again, this is important work, and I do it for all of us. That's how we get free.
I think that's an important lesson for all of us. So, irrespective of the type of communication, the communication is an opportunity for all of us to reflect on. And I like this idea of who did we miss? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, but you're right. You said you're officer of the state. Empire State University is part of SUNY, mm-hmm. But the idea is that your role is to make sure that you bring folks along, irrespective of from whence they've come, because they're now students of Empire State University, but you're almost like the steward of their well-being, the steward of their academic achievement in this regard. So I really appreciate that. That's something we can all take away with us is how do we learn from the response that we're receiving from others?
Absolutely. And my charge from the president has always been to serve the students, faculty, and staff. Mm-hmm. And I do that in the most fulsome way possible.
So we're speaking with Xiomara Giordano, the Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer at Empire State University. Your president, Lisa Vollendoff, spoke about SUNY Empire as the first IHE institution of higher education designated as an autism support college and the Center for Autism Advocacy, which is known as CARES. It's technically Center for Autism Advocacy Research, Education, and Supports. Recently, the university launched the Licenciatura de Administración de Empresas en Español.
Mhm.
Can you share with us the significance of these two initiatives, CARES and this new program, as assets for your student body?
Absolutely. So, the really beautiful part of both of these things is the institution, has a recognition. We have recognized that there are people who are not being served, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people who need to be in environments that are supportive of who they are. We have to do a better job of understanding. So CARES does a lot of work around, what does it look like for a person who is neurodivergent to experience higher education and fully have access to all of the things that they need in the ways that they need it, right? With the supports around their educational experience so that they can fully engage, right? So we get the full spectrum of their brilliance and contribution.
Right.
And so I think that is really important. And it's a space that has been challenging for a lot of brick and mortar institutions because the kind of services that are needed, really do require a huge expense, right? There's in a brick and mortar, right? To have somebody who's a para in a classroom walking with a student going, these can be really cost prohibitive. And the level of expertise, we're very, very fortunate that we have an incredible team who has really leaned into this work. Noor Syed is a phenomenal educator and really, really committed to this research. And so, we already have the expertise building out these supports. So, that's the work that CARES is doing is magnificent. As far as the BBA in Spanish, right, and working, in New York State, it's projected that, Spanish is the second largest, Spanish-speaking population is in New York, according to the U.S. Census, right? More than 41.2 million people are currently living in Spanish-speaking homes, and 2.7 million of them reside in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of folks. And it's people who really need to be connected to an opportunity, right? So they have no lack of capacity, just similarly to the students who are neurodivergent, right? There's no lack of capacity. It just they need another modality. And so they needed this modality so that they could too lean into higher education in a full way. And the beautiful part about the BBA in Spanish is that it's really being created to be taught entirely in Spanish with all of the wraparound supports, financial aid, accessibility, tutoring, faculty and staff in Spanish, right? So that there is no dissonance that happens with these students who are coming to this work, who want to get this degree, who want to either put it into action in their local communities or work internationally. And again, it is what Empire has always done, meet students where they're at. And so both of these allow for us to create ways to meet students where they're at and let them show up as their full selves, be as successful as they need to be, and then move on to their next iteration, which I'm really proud to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, this is all so exciting. I almost, it begs me the question, I would like to be a fly on the wall, to sit in one of your office meetings to understand. Let's just take CARES, for example. So how do the conversations sound like when you're thinking about what do faculty need to know who perhaps have not had experience working with intentionally working with students who have autism. So what does that look like with faculty? And then what does it look like understanding the needs of students and bringing those two together? If you can share a story.
Typically it is that not that what people don't know is that people know too much information. And so they try to recreate everything at once. When it really, if we start thinking about it with a lens, for example, in universal design learning, where we're thinking about how do we make this accessible for everybody, including neurodivergent students, including, English language learners, right? What are the things that what are the small tweaks that we can make that help us get there more effectively and also allow us to work smarter, not harder? And so some of those conversations are, let's look at your syllabus. Is there something in here that lets students know that they have access to these supports, accessibility services, whatever they need? And also, is the language accessible? Are you using universal language, which is going to be something that a student reading this syllabus is going to say, okay, I understand what this contract between myself and the faculty member is. I think the most important work that we do are those small edits, right? Those small bumps that come. And of course, there is heavy lifting that is done that is like, curriculum review that, CARES does that is outside of those spaces. But usually the most impactful thing that we can do is to, help everyone see that, these small adjustments make big waves. And then when we have to do bigger adjustments, we already have trust and comfort and connection so that we can move forward together.
Thank you for listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence. This episode is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EdUpXE15OFF. Check out the details in the show notes or learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
So what I'm hearing, which is very powerful, is your work, and you've already mentioned this, but to have you vocalize it, that it cuts across what someone might say, this is what the provost or vice president of academic affairs does, working with academic programs and faculty. And then you have perhaps a vice president for student affairs who focus on student affairs side. But your office is sort of that bridge between these multiple sort of components. So the student experience, but also supporting faculty at high levels to make sure that they can be effective in advancing access, opportunity, and high quality instruction and supports for students.
Yeah, definitely the work of the Chief Diversity Officer, if done right, is enterprise-wide. So we are there as kind of the third man in this, in these situations. I am not by any stretch of the imagination the provost or doing the work of the provost. I am here as a support to the provost. Mm-hmm. I am here as a support to student affairs. I am here as a support to human resources, as a support to administration and finance, as a support to enrollment management. My role is to ensure that they are doing this work. And if I notice there's a hole, I'm like, hey, let's look at this hole before we move forward, right? I don't want them to duplicate their efforts, and I don't want my work to be responding to grievances. I want my work to be allowing for everyone to have the best experience from the initial step, right? Without any kind of rewinds.
Yeah, I like that. We're speaking with Xiomara Giordano, then Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer at Empire State University. My next question is, what has surprised you the most across your career as a DEI officer? I know you've had other roles, but in this role as a DEI officer, thinking about what you've learned so far through the breadth of your career, what has been the aha moment that has shaped your views of educational excellence?
Sure. So what surprised me the most across my career is how often that resistance to diversity, equity, and inclusion comes not from opposition to its goals, but misconceptions about what inclusive excellence actually means in practice. So, like one of my aha moments came when I realized that framing our work around shared values and concrete outcomes rather than abstract complex concepts or compliance transforms the conversation entirely. So when we focus on how inclusive practices, improve teaching, effectiveness or research innovation or student success, we move from seeing DEI as a separate initiative to understanding it as an essential component of educational excellence. So this revelation kind of really shaped my approach to emphasizing what excellence requires, that excellence requires equity. They're inseparable, right? These two things. And most rigorous academic environments are precisely the ones where diverse perspectives are valued and where all community members have equitable opportunities to contribute and succeed. So if we're looking at where do we want to be? I'm a big fan of backwards design, right? So where do we want to be? What is our goal? And then we're building backwards. We realize that we're going to need more voices. We're going to need, different ways of looking at this. And we're going to need to move in a way that everybody has an opportunity to put their thumb on it. So all of those things are the same principles, right? We're just thinking about it in a results-oriented fashion, rather than looking at as, this is a compliance thing. We just have to do this for the numbers, that I think people start to get really anxious and confused and fearful when they think that you're taking from them, because everything feels cumulative. But if you talk to them about I am trying to give to you more options, more access, more ideas, then all of a sudden it feels more generative, and they're like, oh, we're reaching a goal together because we're all investing in the same way, right? And so that for me has really been very forming in my thoughts about the ways that educational excellence go hand in hand. If you want to fully engage in higher education, then you need to do it in this way, because if you don't, then we're not going to be successful, any of us.
Well, for me, that translates as your work is one that humanizes what we do in higher education to support, again, you've this breadth of not just students, but also the adults and other individuals who then support students. So I think you're right. We often want the same goals, which is educational excellence, and we may define it a bit differently. Your role is to make sure that every student who says, I want to study at Empire State University, has that opportunity, and break down those barriers. And how do we work together to dismantle those barriers?
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate that. And what has inspired you the most about your work at Empire State University so far that keeps you going, those days when you wake up and you says, wow, I can't believe I get paid to do this?
So two things come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind are my colleagues. My colleagues and their commitment to this work has been incredible. And their commitment to students who have been left behind repeatedly by traditional educational services, right? So I'm deeply inspired by my colleagues, but also, watching what Empire is and the ripple effects of our initiatives across the institution. So when I see faculty members who are hey, I'm going to change this thing because I read something that the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion shared, and it made me consider something about my syllabus or my coursework, or watching students who are engaging more deeply. When I see staff members applying an equity lens. So if I'm in a meeting and somebody goes, I was thinking about this thing that I heard and I realized that this was not balanced, I should change it, because they know that it's better for the community, because they intrinsically feel this is the direction that we need to be moving in. And they find innovative solutions to longstanding problems, those wicked problems that we talk about that end up creating a barrier for students. So I am the most joyous and inspired in my work when I see people doing it without me. Right? They have gotten there on their own, and they're like, oh, this is amazing. I had this thought, and I'm like, you did? That's fantastic. And actually, I'll add one more thing. I'm so inspired by our students. We just got through commencement season. Yep. We had 4 ceremonies. Watching these students who bring their full, authentic selves to this space and to these classes, and they courageously advocate for a university that reflects their experiences and their aspirations, and remind us daily of our purpose and push us to live to our highest ideals as an institution, right? To show up as the place that they need us to be. It is incredible. It's incredible, and it inspires me to consider the ways that, one little ripple has really, moved the needle, maybe for a family and possibly for generations. So that's pretty incredible.
Wow, wonderful. I mean, I feel joy in your responses about, what inspires you. And I can see the smile on your face. So I know it lifts you as well. I'm going to ask a very mundane question. You mentioned 4 ceremonies for commencement.
Sure.
Online institution. How do you manage commencement? Online programs? Do you have, online ceremonies and in-person ceremonies? Are they across the state? And I know you have a growing population outside of New York. Do you host those ceremonies outside of the state as well?
We have 3 traditionally in-person ceremonies. So one ceremony is held in Albany. That's the one that's closest to our flagship institution in Saratoga Springs. And the next ceremony is typically in New York City, which is one of our largest attended ceremonies. This year, because of the amount of students, the largest kind of graduating class in New York City, we had to split it to 2 separate evenings. And then we have a ceremony in Rochester, and students are encouraged to come and walk across that stage, meet the administrators, see their faculty, shake hands, get hugs, get all of the love and applause, and they are very well attended. We have, on average in a commencement season, about, I'd say 1,000 students who show up. We have gone over 100,000 alumni, which is amazing. So it is a beautiful moment. We want students to be able to show up and to have this moment, this culminating moment, because it reminds them that people were there, people held them up, whether that's family, faculty, staff members. We have a lot of staff members who volunteer to support the event. Obviously having an event of that size requires a lot. And so sometimes they'll see somebody they've only ever seen in the little box on their screen, and it's just tears. And, I joke with students who meet me in person, like, oh, look, there's the back of my head too, right? Like, because they've only ever seen me in this aspect. So really it is a beautiful moment, and it really allows our students to own their hard work, right? And we, there's always tears. Some woman who has gone back to school after raising her children is crossing, and her adult children are screaming and yelling, "That's my mom, that's my mom." And all of us are moved. We have a lot of military serving who, are in full regalia with their military stoles on, crossing that stage. Again, thank you for giving to us and, allowing us to pour into you, right? So it is a beautiful, beautiful moment. So we do have those wonderful ceremonies all over the state.
I love that. So that's everyone needs to take a respite, as they say on Bridgerton, after that season of commencement, because you're traveling to these multiple locations. And as you mentioned, in New York City, or the metropolitan area, you had your largest group of students graduating, so you needed to invest in 2 ceremonies. So I can imagine that has been daunting, but also uplifting at the same time.
It is incredibly enriching.
So what would you like to share that the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community can look out for from SUNY Empire or your personal work? And how might we engage with SUNY Empire or you going forward?
Sure. So, it's always exciting to be here. Our president is an innovator and a 2-time Educational Trailblazing Award winner. So there's always something that's happening here. Right. We have new degree and certificate programs launching this fall to meet the needs of the workforce and workers, right? So we have a new Bachelor of Science in Information Technology and a new Master's of Arts in organizational psychology and an advanced certificate in bilingual education and higher education leadership. So we have really good, expansive ways to reach people and to connect. We also have a number of academic programs in development and approval stages. So like healthcare management and hospitality management. So the College of Business is really leaning into ways that we can support, those people who are ready to take their career to the next level. Mm-hmm. My office is really just creating ways to, again, remind people for skill building, right? To think about skill building here around communication. So we're doing some civic discourse training and offering our community opportunities to really learn how to talk to each other about things that are really important to them, the hard things in the soft ways, right? The ways that we can really be hard on a topic and soft on a person and remember that we need each other. So we're doing that. We're helping with bolstering employee affinity groups, reminding people that if we work together, so we should also be able to share the things that make us happy, and allow that, allow us to kind of bring that part of ourselves to work. And you can find me here, doing good work and helping create spaces for more new students, faculty, and staff year over year. Because after all, it's not about me, it's about them, right? This work is really important, and I do it because this is the world I want to be part of. So.
Yeah, I like that part of hard on the topic, but soft on the person, which allows a person ultimately to show up fully and authentically mm-hmm. in a way that is supportive, but yet, I think you used the word like civil discourse. Mm-hmm. So it allows us to have civility, but also to recognize the person for their full potential within mm-hmm. the educational enterprise. So we may have to come back and check in on you to see how that's going.
Absolutely.
So,
sorry.
Go ahead.
It is one of the things, like just the same way I was talking about, kind of going back to people, like thinking about who we left behind. It's also another part of that, right? So adding to the ways that we talk to each other, about each other, for each other, we really have to create the skills and have to build the toolkit so that we can have those conversations and figure out what happened, right? Like what happened along the way that made you feel like you weren't part of this? And how do I hear something that makes me uncomfortable? For example, somebody who espouses something I don't believe in, they have a right to feel that way. They have a right to feel in any way, I am a strong believer in, and you don't have to parrot what I'm saying. I would appreciate if what you tell me is based in fact. If it's not based in fact, I would like an opportunity to share information with you, right? Like, how do I share this information with you so that you can now have a more critical lens and maybe develop a new way of thinking about things? But I'm not here to change your mind, and I'm here to share with you information and data so that you can make informed choices and say things that are rooted in fact. But again, your ability to exist isn't based on that, right? Like, you can be part of this community if we don't agree, and that's okay.
Wonderful. So, Xiomara, I want to thank you for this opportunity to learn with and from you here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Thank you so much. It's been an amazing pleasure.
Thank you for engaging with EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a member of the EdUp Experience Network of educational podcasts. You can find this and other episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Radio, and other outlets where you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow us and share within your network. To leave a comment or suggest a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com.